Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, Powerful Perspectives. I'm Brandon. I'm your host, I guess, for this channel. And today I want to share a story with you that I found illustrative, I found insightful, that I hope can help. I have titled this video, The Symptom is Not the Problem. And I'd like to give like a little story from my own life to kind of help illustrate this point a little bit, and hopefully you can kind of see what I'm trying to get at and maybe take something from it. So for the past month or so, I have been experiencing kind of like a tingling or a burning sensation that kind of goes down my left arm and into like my left thumb. And I wasn't really sure necessarily where that came from. I had a couple ideas. I have scoliosis. So like my back, for those of you who don't know what scoliosis is, it's when the curvature of your spine is like off from what it should be. So normally the spine is supposed to like curve kind of from the front to the back. Mine goes from side to side. And so that can have different like issues that kind of affect your spinal cord, like, you know, your discs and bones in your spine are kind of out of place, and that can pinch different nerves that affects different parts of your body sometimes. And so I've been going to different chiropractors and osteopaths and different people to help me kind of with my back. Maybe it doesn't help that I'm sitting forward right now. My posture is kind of terrible. I need to help. I need to change some of those. Maybe I'll sit back here. Let's try that. I'll try to have better posture for this video. It seems only appropriate, but yeah. So I go to different professionals to try to help me with that. But yeah, in different meetings that I've had or different appointments that I've had with my chiropractor, for example, he talks a lot about how different symptoms or different things in the body kind of stem from the spine, which makes a lot of sense because, I mean, the brain and this, like the spinal cord is really what sends all of the different messages, all of the different like neurons and sensors, like they all send information to the spine, which then communicates it back to the brain, right? And the brain then kind of decides what to do with it. It sends different helps. It sends different neurotransmitters, sends different messages throughout the body to help it to heal itself, right? So a lot of symptoms like that originate or that you know have their place kind of in the spine or in the back are going to affect all different types of the body. So knowing this, I kind of assumed maybe that like the burning in my arm that I just kind of started a little bit, like, because it was associated with some back pain as well. I thought it might be kind of connected to the back. And sure enough, I went to the chiropractor and kind of told him of the symptoms. And he said, oh yeah, that's going to be connected to like this like disc like right here. Like it's connected to a nerve in my neck. That was being pinched, that was out of place. And so he adjusted that like a couple times. I went back for different appointments, and it has helped a lot with the symptoms. I'm currently living in a different country, so not able to visit him quite as often. I'm going to a different professional here. But yeah, like that's kind of the main point that I wanted to get at, was the symptom versus kind of the cause or the root, where the problem comes from. So the problem in this case was originating from like a pinched nerve in my neck, right? Which is a lot more central, like it's a lot closer to the brain, and obviously like it's with the spinal cord and everything. That's where like the message of the pain or like was coming from. But I didn't feel it in my neck. I felt it like in my thumb, like, and kind of burning a little bit down my arm. And it wasn't constant, like it would kind of come and go like in different waves throughout the day, but like every day I would feel a little bit of it, right? But I was feeling like this burning kind of down my arm, and then like a numbness kind of in my thumb. And so that was the sign, right? That was the signal saying that, okay, something's wrong, something's out of place, something's not really working the way that it should. And the signal came from like my arm and thumb. But that is not where the actual problem was. The actual problem was deeper in, was you know, in my neck. And I think that that same idea applies in a lot of other places as well. I think very often in life, what appears to be the issue on the outside, where the signal or like the light is coming from, like where like that kind of symbol that catches our attention and shows us, hey, like something isn't working, something's out of place, something's amiss. Often like that external like symptom or what shows us those things is often not the problem itself. And I think this is where we get turned around a lot, and what can sometimes become confusing. It's a bit of I don't know if I would necessarily call it a paradox, but it's definitely, we might call it an irony, like in the sense that it's different from our expectation, right? We see this symbol or this like the signal that, okay, like something's wrong, and we kind of assume that the thing that's hurting or the thing that's like blinking at us, the thing that's like kind of waving and trying to catch our attention, we assume that that's the problem because that's where the energy is, that's where the focus is, that's where the message is coming from, right? Or at least that's where we encounter the message. That's where we notice the message. It may not be where the message is coming from originally, but that's where we notice it. That's where we see it. And we tend to kind of think, okay, like that's where I see the message. That must be where the problem is. And it's not always that way. I think of it sometimes maybe as like a tree. Like I like to use this metaphor as well in talking about this concept. I'm not sure which metaphor will resonate more with you, like if it's, the body one or the tree one. But if you think of a tree, like a tree has a bunch of like leaves on the outside, right? And let's say that like, let's say it's not autumn time necessarily. So like the tree, but there's something wrong with like the leaves. Let's say there's something wrong with the leaves in like one part of the tree. All the other leaves are fine. Like they're the color that they're supposed to be. They're big, they're beautiful, they're happy. But like the leaves in like one section of the tree are just like kind of dead. Or they're just like, they're a weird color, they're a weird shape, they're just different, right? They're not the way that they're supposed to be. We might look at that and say, okay, well, there's a problem here with this section of like the tree, like the leaves are like weird, right? Like they're not the way they're supposed to be. And we might kind of be tempted to say, okay, the problem's with the leaves. But if you think of like where do the leaves take all of their energy? Where do they take all of their nutrients from, right? It comes from the trunk of the tree. It comes through the roots, like they get the nutrients. Well, it's kind of both, right? Like, I mean, the leaves, through photosynthesis and everything, they get like the sunlight. Sunlight obviously comes from above, but they get a lot of nutrients and water from the roots and the ground, right? So it's kind of like a top down and a bottom up simultaneously. But a lot of like the nutrients and the water and all of that come from the roots, through the trunk, through the branches. So there's a channel, right? There's a pathway. And I think we need to look a little bit deeper sometimes. I think we run the risk of just completely misunderstanding, miscalculating, mislabeling, misdiagnosing the problem if we just look at the surface. I think most things on the surface that catch our attention, they're signals. They're signals telling us to look deeper somewhere else, right? And the real problem might come from an offshoot, right? It might be that like this certain section of leaves comes from an offshoot branch that's connected to another branch, and maybe the other offshoots from that same branch are fine. It's just that offshoot that isn't working, right? That isn't doing what it should be doing. And so maybe like we need to just kind of prune or clip or look at the issue in that little offshoot. Sometimes the issue might go deeper than that. It might go straight to like a main branch and straight to the trunk. And sometimes we need to like really just clip it off, or like really get deeper like into the trunk of the tree, like really get into the middle and prune it out of there. And so like I hope that these metaphors maybe are able to speak to you in some way. Like obviously, like with botany and with trees, I'm not a botanist, I'm not an herbologist, I'm not like I'm not a biologist by any point, so like I don't really understand. I'm just using this as a hypothetical metaphor to illustrate a point, right? Just as I'm not a physiotherapist, I'm not a chiropractor, I'm not a physical doctor. But I do think that these concepts, these ideas, are illustrative, and that they do show patterns, I think, that are really common in our lives. I do study psychology. I'm finishing my last semester of my master's in psychology right now. And we do run into this a lot in psychology, where like mental health and the symptoms that people present with in mental health, where they say, okay, like I can't do this, I can't do that, like the symptoms that they present with in a clinic or, in a therapy session, they are symbols, right? They are signals for something often a lot deeper that is really the root cause of the problem. And it just presents itself in different ways, right? It's the body or the mind's way of showing us, hey, something's not going right. But often that signal, it's not accurate to what the problem is. We kind of conflate the two. And if we just focus on the signal, if we just focus on treating symptoms, we can try to reduce the symptoms, right? Like you can cut back those branches, like you can cut off like the leaves you can clear the leaves of the tree. You can cut off all the leaves of that section of the tree, for example, get rid of all those leaves. But if the issue is like the branch, right? If it's whether it's the offshoot or whether it's closer to the trunk, doesn't matter. If the issue is coming like through the branch, then any new leaves that grow on that branch, on that offshoot, whatever, on that section of the tree, any new leaves that grow on that section of the tree are going to have the same problem, right? Because the problem is coming literally through the branches. And so you need to look deeper, and we need to try to find where the actual issue is. And yeah, as I say, like this definitely applies to mental health. I know from studying mental health, like it applies in this terrain, in this discipline. I think it applies, like, I mean, from my own experience, it applies in physical health a lot of the times as well, like with chiropractics, but also with other areas in the medical field. From what I know of the medical field, the very little that I do know, like definitely a lot of symptoms are often signals of other problems that are kind of deeper, that are hidden in some way, right? That are connected, but in ways that aren't always obvious from just looking at the symptoms. And that's really, like, these things I think is what makes professionals professional in the sense that like people who study these areas, what they're studying is those connections, right? They're studying the connection between the symptoms, like the signals, what we see on the outside, and what they could represent, what they could be connected with. And we look at patterns, right? That's ideally what science is supposed to be. It's supposed to be observation of patterns and learning how to, as accurately as possible, predict certain outcomes based on patterns that have been established through observation and through measurement. And so, yeah, we do this in the medical field, we do this in the mental health field, we do this in all sorts of fields. But I think it applies also in business settings, in social settings, like the problems that present in a business meeting, for example, like in a boardroom, the problems that present there, I would hazard to guess that many of them are not the main issues. I would put it out there that a lot of the presenting issues are just symptomatic of what the actual issue is, the deeper issue is. Again, I'm not a businessman. I've never been in a boardroom. That's not really my place, at least where I spend most of my time. But I do think that this is a pretty common and pervasive pattern. And if we find this pattern in our own biology, if we find it in our mentation, like in how our brain works, it makes sense that would translate into our interactions with each other and into different social contexts, business context, because business contexts at the end of the day are they're composed of people, right? People together making decisions. And if this is happening with each of us individually as people, it stands to reason that that would find its way into those settings as well, I think. So take that for what it's worth, run with it, see where it takes you. Tell me what your thoughts are. I would love to hear your impressions, your added insights, your questions, your curiosities about it. I just want to kind of start the conversation going and see if we can get kind of a bit of a dialogue going about this. But yeah, just some thoughts that I had from my own experience that I wanted to share with you. Yeah, let's just try to pay attention and see what symptoms are going on in our personal lives and in our interpersonal lives as well, and try to think a little bit deeper about what maybe they could be indicating to us. And yeah, I'll leave that with y'all, and I'll talk to you soon.